Well, good morning, everyone. It is time for another Software Test Professionals community webinar. I'm Rick Baucom. I'm actually setting in for Smina Mishra today. She was unable to make it to today's webinar, but I'm sitting in for her, and I will introduce Nancy, and we'll get this webinar started. Today's webinar again is Leading Business Testers with Nancy Kelln. Nancy is a QA and test manager for Unimagined Testing, Inc. And we're really happy to have her. We've had Nancy do, several webinars, a bunch of speaking for us in the past at STP and a number of other things like podcasts and all sorts of other things. Nancy's a very active person in the testing community, and we really appreciate her working with us here at STP. So speaking of STPCon, we've got, of course, our big conferences coming up here very shortly in Newport Beach, California, from April 9th through the 12th. We've got a sale on right now. If you register by Friday, you'll be able to save yourself an additional $300 off of the registration, but you only have 2 days left. We've been doing the STP conferences for some time now. They're quite fun and quite informative. We've got a number of topics that we cover during the actual conference itself. We cover automation, agile, performance, DevOps, mobile, security, leadership, which is one of Nancy's specialties, and strategy. We also have a number of networking activities as well. You should check out the full schedule at stpcon.com/event-schedule, and you'll be able to see what we've got in store for you this year or this spring there in Newport Beach. Speaking of that, we've got Nancy here. Nancy, how you doing today?
I'm great. How are you today?
Excellent. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. How's the weather in Canada today?
It's cold. It's snowing outside my window quite a bit. We've had so much snow here. It's been crazy.
Well, and I'm sure
I'm
you're looking
forward to being in
to
California.
Exactly. I was going to say, I just got back from there during a site visit, and gosh, it was so nice. The weather was just gorgeous. The sun was beaming down, and I'm from Colorado, so I can't wait to get back.
Snow.
Yeah. So
You're
Nancy,
familiar with the white stuff.
Yeah, right. So you've got a workshop coming up at STPCon, exploring context-driven and exploratory testing. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so there's a lot more organizations that are using exploratory and context-driven testing, and I've been doing it for a number of years. And as testers, we seem to have the test execution of that figured out fairly well. It's the other aspects of testing that people struggle with, like the test planning, the test design, and the reporting. So this workshop looks at if you've been doing test execution or you want to start doing it, how do you also incorporate exploratory concepts into your test planning, your test design, and then your test reporting? I see a lot of testers say, well, we do manual testing and we report typical standard test reports out of that. And then they just kind of put exploratory testing in a bucket and don't really sell to their organization the value of it and what they're really doing there. So there's still a lot of mystery around these areas of it. So this workshop explores that, guides people through how do you put exploratory concepts in planning, design, and reporting aspects. And then how do you sell that across your organization when you get pushback? Because typically we still do when we try to do some exploratory testing. So that's what this is going to uncover and explore.
Excellent. We're looking forward to it. I know that most of our attendees are as well. I know you've spoken with us a number of times, and your sessions are always quite popular. So we're looking forward to seeing how this one does in the spring here. So I know that you've been to STPCon a lot of times, and just give me quick little pointers on what folks how they can get the most out of it, and then also what are the sessions that you're looking forward to from this spring conference?
Sure. So I think the way people can get the most out of it, everybody comes and they'll look at the conference program ahead of time and figure out what sessions and workshops they may want to attend. And I find people really limit themselves to just that type of interaction. I'll go to a session, I'll go to a workshop, I'll speak with the speaker, I'll listen to what they have to say, but they really miss out on the networking opportunities that conferences like you guys host provide. I want to encourage testers to get up and talk to other testers, talk to the presenters. We're all very approachable. We all love talking about testing. So if you come up to any one of us, we'll probably talk your ear off, and just really build connections that you can take back to the office with you. So make sure you connect with people, get their names, connect with them on LinkedIn, and just talk about the challenges you're having in your organization, where you may want to learn and grow. Find other people with similar interests. And for me, the networking coming out of conferences has been the most valuable. I've got a network of people that I can reach out to at any point in time when I'm struggling back in my office and get their ideas and bounce my ideas off of them, get guidance and direction. Gives me an opportunity to share what I'm thinking with other people and give them help as well. And it's really one of the more valuable things you can take away from the conference is those friendships that you can build.
Yeah,
As far as
I always see you and a bunch of other folks just like kind of gathered around a table chatting and those kind of things, having good conversations, and those are really fun to witness.
they're fun to be in.
Yeah. All right. Well, I appreciate you speaking for us. That's going to be huge for us coming up here in the spring. And did you have a particular session that you were interested in going to this time?
Yeah, there were two of them that I was looking at. One is Smitta's workshop on testing without requirements. She's an amazing speaker. She's always has a lot of fun in her workshops, and it's one that I think would be really entertaining and good. She's always got a lot of great information, so that was definitely one on my list. And then Damien has a keynote, I think it's during the first day, at the end of the first day, about more than that. And the topic is interesting, but Damien is such an enthusiastic and fun speaker to listen to. He's not the typical stand in front of the room, just be boring, kind of like your university professors would be. He's definitely entertaining. His background is in improv comedy, and he uses a lot of that when he presents just to make it fun. He's got meaningful messages in his presentation, but I always have so much fun in his sessions that every time I see him speak, it's one I definitely want to attend.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Damien's one of those guys that I just get captivated by when he's up speaking, and he's he's a nice guy to boot.
Yeah, and he gives a performance. It's not just a talk, it's definitely a performance, and he's got that down pat. He's one of the guys I watch and go, I want to do more of that when I speak, because it looks like he's even having a lot of fun.
Right,
Not just the rest of us, but he's having a great time up there too. So it's just a great energy, great session that he puts on every time.
Well, good. I appreciate those, and I'm sure Damien will appreciate you mentioning it.
Yeah, he's a great guy. He really is.
So another great speaker we have at our conferences on a regular basis, actually doing our next webinar. We've got Michael Hackett coming up on February 28th. His webinar, Today's Regression Automation Challenges for Continuous Delivery. He's going to deliver that for us coming up here in a couple weeks. So if you haven't already, make sure you go out to STP softwaretestprofessionals.com/training, and you'll see that particular event there where you can actually sign up for it. So we're also looking forward to have Michael at STPCon this spring too. So let me do like real quick housekeeping slides here. Just so everyone knows, everybody is muted during this actual webinar. If you have questions, you can type those in the questions panel, and toward the end of the webinar, Nancy will be able to answer your questions that you might have during the actual webinar. We are also recording this webinar, so it will be available online. Once it is available online, you'll get an email with a location. And of course, share that with your teammates and those kind of things. It'll be up probably within 48 hours. That's typically what we shoot for. So hopefully by Friday we'll have that ready to rock and roll for you guys to look at and review. So also, of course, we're on Twitter at Software Test Pro, and the hashtag for this webinar is hashtag STP Webinar. And if you'd like to quote Nancy on a particular thing, it'd be great if you included her Twitter handle in there at Kelln. It's right there on the screen, so make sure you do that as well. So let's go ahead and get started. I just want to do a little kind of a formal introduction of Nancy. It's every time I read her bio, I'm always like, man, she's very busy, and
Yeah.
and it's just
Too much
amazing.
so some days.
Right. So Nancy, of course, is a passionate, context-driven, and exploratory test manager with 16 years of diverse IT experience. She enjoys working with teams that are implementing or enhancing their testing practices and provides adapted testing approaches to exploratory, context-driven, and traditional testing teams. She has coached test teams in various environments and has facilitated numerous local and international workshops and presentations, as of course we mentioned before, STP Kelln. From small scale to multi-million-dollar projects, Nancy has played many roles within testing teams, including project test manager, test lead, and tester. Her most recent work has been exclusively with context-driven implementations at large-scale companies, and she's an active member of the Calgary Software Quality Discussion Group, the Association for Software Testing, and of course our organization, Software Test Professionals. Nancy lives in Airdrie, Alberta, Canada. And one other thing, I remember from one of our webinars, not a webinar, but an actual podcast that we did with you a while ago. I remember that you're an avid motorcycle rider and you belong and actually help run a motorcycle group. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is. I help with a motorcycle charity that's in Alberta, the province that I'm in. They raise money for bikers that have been injured while riding motorcycles. So everyone knows motorcycle riding is dangerous, but we all love to do it because we're crazy. So oftentimes people get hurt. Either somebody takes them out on the bike or they have an accident because of a mistake that they've made. So we raise money to help families out. So if somebody in their family has been injured, they reach out to us and we provide a care package, information around insurance programs that they may have available to them, and just moral support. A lot of the people on the board have been injured in a motorcycle accident. I never have been, thank God. But a lot of people have, and so they can relate to these people and help them through what they're going through, because it's a fairly traumatic experience when it happens.
Yeah, I can imagine. I don't ride myself. My neighbor does. He's an avid rider as well. But I think about that all the time. Every time I see Robert going out, I'm like, man, be careful. That's all I can think about. But so, Nancy, I'm going to go ahead and turn over the screen control to you, and you can get your presentation up, and we can get started.
Perfect.
And I'll talk to you at the end of the webinar for questions and answers. And thanks again for joining us today.
You're welcome. Thanks, Rick.
Alrighty.
So good day, everybody. It's great to see so many people here today. So we're going to talk about leading business testers. And this is an area of testing that I've been thrown into from time to time. I've just recently changed jobs, and it's something I'm going to be doing again on a very large scale HR project. And we have to approach this differently when we get into it. So that's what this session is going to talk about today, is how do you lead business testers? Because it is different than leading a team of professional testers. So that's what we're going to go through today. So let's get started by level setting on what I mean by a business tester. Who are these people? Typically, they're a representative that's come from an area of your business or the company. So it could be somebody from finance, somebody from legal. We're changing that aspect of their system, and we don't have professional testers to test. So we're taking these people out of their day-to-day business jobs and asking them to be testers for us, are the experiences that I've had. They may or may not be part of your project team. They could be just brought in for the test phase, or they could be moved completely out of their day-to-day role and into the project team, which in my experience has been the ideal situation, but it doesn't always happen. And we'll talk about how do you work in both of those models. They're brought in to test the product, typically because of the experience that they have in their day-to-day job. They're the users of it. They're going to understand how it works. So they've got the knowledge to be able to do the testing, but they're not a professional tester. And that's where our role for leading comes in, is to really help them understand, how do I get through this testing? What do I need to do? Sometimes they're intimidated by it. So we got to help them through that. So this is just, here's what I mean by a business tester. In my experience, they've come from various areas of the business, and some of these areas are great areas to have people from because they're really knowledgeable, and some of them are less ideal. So if we start at the top of the list, our business end users, our subject matter experts, and the super users are really the most fantastic group to have people from. These people know the system. They use it all the time, especially if they're a subject matter expert. They know their area, so whether it's finance or legal or HR, really well. So they'll be able to answer questions about how should the system flow? Is the configuration right? Within a matter of seconds. They know this knowledge day to day. It's not something they have to look up. Whereas a professional tester may have to go back to a requirements document or have a conversation or remember something from a meeting because it's not their area of expertise. The ideal group are also the super users. These are people that typically, they're the ones in the department that everyone goes to. So if I'm in finance and I can't get something to work on my computer, it's Bob, our super user, that I go to and I say, hey, Bob, I can't get this to work. Can you help me out? These guys seem to know the system inside out and backwards. They're actually kind of doing a testing function in their job, although they wouldn't see it that way. And I don't think testers would call it that way. But when they get called over to help somebody, again, they're exploring the system. They're trying to figure out why, if in my example, I can't get something to work. So he's going to try a few things. He's maybe going to go back to his desk and see what he can get done through his login on his thing. He's actually sort of testing the system for me. So they come from a great mindset of, how does this work? What do we need to do to get things to flow smoothly for my group? And they typically find the best bugs when it comes to the testing phase. Tech support people are also part of the super users group, I guess, as well. They're dealing with problems day to day. They know where the issues are in the system already. They know where people have trouble. So they also have a real great deal of knowledge as well, more technically slanted than business slanted sometimes, but they're also great support people as well for testing. Some of the other people we end up with that aren't as great are sometimes people from call centers. Depending on what type of software it is. If it's call center software, that's great. They're kind of our end users. But if they're more on the support side and are the first line support for the company taking just those beginning calls, they may not be as strong as some of the other people on my list here. Another group that doesn't typically have strengths are co-op students and interns. I've seen projects where they hire co-op students and give them to the test team, and these people are brilliantly smart, but they don't know the business because they're new to the company. They don't understand all the nuances of the system. And typically there's a lot of training that can go into this group. So if you are leading testing with a bunch of co-op students and interns, you may be more challenged than if you were using business end users and subject matter experts. The other ones that kind of fall into the same group as the co-op students and interns are the managers and leaders of the companies. I know when I've had manager roles, I don't tend to know the system as well as the people that necessarily report to me. As a manager, my focus is on keeping my team happy, doing what they need to do to get their jobs done day to day, paving a way so that my team can work smoothly and easily, removing roadblocks. So I don't often have an opportunity to learn the system as well as I might like to. So when I end up with managers and leaders on my test teams, if I'm leading business testing, sometimes I wonder, are these guys really going to know the system? What's good though is they'll typically identify when they don't, and they usually know who will. So if I've tasked a manager or a lead with an area of the application they don't know really well, they often know who they can pull from their team, and the resources are available to them to move, that I can quickly solve any problems there by saying to them, can we get Barbara from your team to come over and test this area of finance since it seems to be her forte? And usually they'll absolutely clear time for her to do that for me. So there's also other places that I've seen business testers come from. You may have a different experience where your business testers are coming from a different place, but typically these are the people in the business from these areas that I end up with. Oops, I need to hit the space bar. So why do organizations want to use business testers as opposed to professional testers? The obvious one is the first one there, the UAT bullet that I have. Obviously, we have testers that are users of the system during our user acceptance test phase, which makes sense. That's what we want to have. But for this presentation, I'm talking about testing all the way through, not just the UAT phase at the end, but testing from the time that we get it delivered all the way up to and including UAT. Because on the teams I've been on, it's been me as the lead and no other professional testers, just business people. So with test teams, you do see people come in at UAT from the business, but I'm looking just strictly at it's only me as the tester. I have far too much scope to test it all myself. In fact, if I tried, I'd probably put the project at risk. So I need to step out of actually hands-on testing, do a leadership role, and get business testers to do the hands-on testing. So aside from UAT, businesses will often add testers from the business due to the time frame of the project. So the project I'm on right now is a large-scale HR project. We do have budget to hire people, but we don't have the time frame. Because the system is so complex, we have so many business rules that a tester couldn't possibly learn in the time that we have. There's no way I can onboard professional testers, train them up for them to be effective at testing. So I need to use people from the business because of the subject matter expertise that they bring. And that goes down to the second last point, the industry specific knowledge, where in one project I had, it was an electrical engineering system. And I was given schematics, which are drawings of all the power grid in the province that I live. And there were 250 different drawings. And they vaguely looked familiar to me. It had the shape of my province. So I knew, okay, yeah, this is the province of Alberta. It had the cities and the towns on the map. And it had all these lines and symbols all over that were connecting the cities and towns. Well, I've traveled quite a bit. Being a motorcycle rider, that's what you do, is ride on roads all day. So I knew looking at the maps that they were wrong because the lines weren't the highways I was familiar with. Well, of course they weren't highways. They were the power lines that connect all of the cities to provide power. And the symbols were the switches and the control areas that they would use to control the power grid. Well, my task was, Nancy, find testers that can test these and we'll know if we've drawn the lines wrong or if we've got the color coding wrong as far as what type of line it is, if the controls and the switches are in the right spots. I had no idea. I didn't know that information. And they had no documentation for me to compare it to because all the documentation we had was outdated and was necessarily not correct. So I couldn't rely on that as my indicator of whether or not these maps were right. So I had to use my business testers. I learned that the controllers in the control room, there were a few of them that used to work as linemen. And what a lineman does in their job is they travel around the province, they look at the power lines to make sure that they're okay, that there's no deterioration, that there's no challenges with that. I'm just gonna have to put you on hold 1 second. My remote vacuum is going off. I forgot to shut it off. I'll be right back.
That's hilarious.
Okay, technology's great until it interrupts us. Sorry about that, everyone.
That's okay. Enjoy.
That's funny. So how I solved this particular testing problem, now that I have my remote vacuum figured out, was I brought these linemen into the room because I realized that if these guys had traveled throughout the province, physically looking at power lines, they knew exactly where every line was. And we managed to get through those 250 diagrams within 2 4-hour working sessions. I brought food and snacks in. I would bring stuff up on the screen. They would criticize where it was wrong. And the designer that had drawn all the diagrams for us had them printed out and was making the edits on the paper. We couldn't have done that in the time frame that we had or the budget that we had on this project in that amount of time. So knowing where to leverage your business testers is really, really powerful. And this is where this industry specific knowledge comes in really handy at times because there was no way we could have figured that out. Finally, one of the, I guess, less enthusiastic reasons that people add business testers to the test team from the business is they don't necessarily understand the value of testing. And your organization may say they will, but you'll notice what they really believe when you see which types of testers they're bringing to your project. If they are clearing the plates of the really subject matter expert testers, the ones that know the system inside out and backwards, and you're being given those testers, your company probably understands the value of testing. But if they've hired you a contingent of co-op students or pulled people that have got free time that are more in a lower level position or don't understand the software as well, they've probably just given you people to get testing done and don't necessarily understand the value of testing. When I first started leading business testers, I ended up in that situation quite a bit where I would get people from the business that had free time, that didn't necessarily know the system, or that were hired just to do testing that were professional testers or had a lot of business knowledge. But so it becomes important for us to start advocating about why testing is important, what value can we provide as a test team, and why it's important to have people that have industry knowledge that do this as a job if they're going to be testing that area of the system. I think I'm getting better at articulating that to organizations because I don't see it as much. And I think other people in our industry are also pushing the value of testing so that companies have seen in the past great testers and said, you know what, testing's important. We're not going to just give people that have free time. We're going to find the people that really need to be there to do it. But those are all the various reasons that I've seen organizations decide to use business testers rather than hiring professional testers to do the testing work. So let's look at some facts about business testers, because these are really important to keep in mind and things that I've realized when I've been doing my testing that we need to consider as we move through leading a team of business testers. The first one, which is fairly obvious, is that they're not testers. And there's a lot of challenges that come with this and considerations. And for each of these facts, we'll look at both of these. So the challenges is that they likely don't understand or are uninterested in understanding testing approaches, terms, and practices. And this is where, when I had my first assignment, I made my biggest mistake. I thought what I needed to do was to train these people to be testers and then let them test, which was completely the wrong approach to take. They aren't interested and they don't understand it. And I found I wasted a lot of time on things that it was easier for me to just change the language I used rather than teach 30 or 40 business testers what language to use. So there are certain things you have to train them on, like how do you log a defect? What's the process it's going to go through? But that should be about it. As far as priorities of bugs, as far as how they should be documenting testing, as far as stage gates and all the rest of things that we look at when we do testing, whether it's white box or black box, all of that they don't need to know. And that's why you're there, is to guide them through the process. They don't need to know the language as they go along. They also don't think like a tester, likely. There's been exceptions where I've had some really fantastic people from the business that would make amazing testers if they ever decided for a career change, but some of them don't think like a tester. So it's up to us leading them through that to really bring that out as far as how do you use the system? What are like to get the scenarios out of them, I guess what I'm trying to say. So they know what their day-to-day job is, but they aren't going to think of that the way we would as testers. So how do you start to work with them one-on-one or in a group to pull that information out? And we'll talk about how we do that. They also tend to be on a spectrum where they either don't appreciate the complexity of testing. So they think, oh, well, it's easy. I'm just going to click on a few things and find problems and that'll be it. Or they could be completely on the other opposite end of the spectrum where they're completely intimidated by testing. They know that it's such a big effort that they feel like they're not going to have enough experience to do it, that the system working is going to depend on them and their opinion of it. If they find bugs or if they don't find bugs, what's their peers going to think of them when they go back, knowing that they were on the project that released this really buggy software? So they may be quite fearful of being assigned this new job of testing. Usually those are the extremes. People sit somewhere along that continuum, but they could be at either end, which I find fascinating when I first meet my testers and try to figure out, okay, where are you? Are you feeling like this is an easy job and it's not going to be difficult? Or are you really intimidated by this? And it's neat to see where people are and then how their opinion of that changes as we go through testing. Some of the positives of having testers that aren't professional testers is that they bring a unique domain knowledge. As testers, we try to put on that hat of here's what this user is going to work like, and here's what that user is going to work like, and really try to get inside the heads of our users and pretend to be them when we test. But they don't have to pretend. That's what they do. And I know when I've watched testers, there's some nuances that they've had that I haven't even realized to consider. So you're going to learn a lot about the ways people use your system if you're working with business testers. And the other great consideration is they use the system the same way they do every day. So in IT, we have an understanding of how we think people use it, but we're going to see what they do every day. They're going to be really quick about it. They're likely going to have shortcuts that they do, ways they get through their day faster that we're going to really see uncovered during the exercise of testing. The second fact is that most of the people that have been assigned this testing role for your project don't want to be testers. They often have a full-time career in their business domain. So they've trained to be a lawyer or an HR professional or an accountant, and they're not looking to make a career change into testing. So again, goes back to the point on the other slide of that's why it's not necessary to train them to be testers. When I have a team of professional testers, I do work on making sure that they understand things the same way, that we are all using the same language, we all understand what it is that we're doing as a team, and we're growing ourselves as testers. I don't need to do that with this group of people because testing is just a temporary project assignment that they have, and they're going to go back to their full-time job. I have had a couple people, though, switch into a career for testing because they've just really loved it and found it to be great fun and ended up staying in their industry and becoming a tester, but that's very, very rare. But some considerations is that you don't need to be successful. You don't need to train them to be testers to be successful. If you guide them through this, they will be able to get through it on their own with your help. They also bring that unique business perspective and experience to the team. And you're going to notice that when you get a number of them together, they share a common language that they understand. So when I was working with the finance team, they were talking about cost centers and general ledgers and journal entries, and this was all very foreign language to me. So it was interesting for me to see what that meant, to see the conversations that they had. And once they get into that groove in their own professional space, I saw a lot of passion come out. The same passion that I have for testing came out in the finance team around the general ledgers balancing and how does their chart of accounts look. They get all excited talking about this stuff. And once I knew what really fueled and fired them, I could use that language with them and get them to really get more engaged in testing and really kind of take the drudgery out of it that some of them approached it with and actually enjoy themselves, because the test environments gave them a place where they could play with the subject matter that they're experts in ways that they couldn't do in their day-to-day business. They could have general ledgers that were completely wrong and meant the company was set for financial ruin, but they didn't have to panic about it. And the finance team seemed to take a bit of fun in that when I was working with them. So it was interesting just to see that I can still get them fired up about the job, even though it's testing, if I found that spark from their regular day-to-day work. The third fact is that they're going to require guidance and support for you, especially around scope, approach, and execution. And it's not just a one-time meeting that you have where you get everyone on the same page. It's ongoing support and encouragement. So they're not going to, some of them want to test everything when they come in the door. Some of them only want to test happy path scenarios, but we really need to give them guidance on, okay, what's our scope going to be? What are we going to test? What's out of scope? Because we know we can't test everything. And we need to sometimes work with our business testers to say, you know, it's okay that we take a risk approach to this, that we put some things and consider them out of scope for this project, even though we want to test them. And it seems to be a constant reminder for them on what's in scope and what's not. And then we have also had discussions around trading scope pieces. So if they tell me, you know, Nancy, we said we wanted this piece out, but it really needs to be in, then we can have those discussions around, okay, well, we can't do it all. What other stuff can fall out, right? And that's constant guidance around the scope, around how we want to test, and then guidance around execution as well, which I find when they're in their own space, so when finance is doing just finance testing, they're really good at working together and getting things done. Typically, they're a team of people, if I'm looking at a single department, that work together day to day anyways. They need each other support to get their jobs done when they go back to their real full-time jobs. What I don't see necessarily happen is when departments need to work together to get testing done, they don't necessarily work together day to day in their full-time jobs. So a lot of it, coaching happens around the execution phase where I need to bring the supply chain department in that makes the orders and purchases things so that finance at the end of the day has the reports and numbers from the business purchases. It just happens naturally in production. As a company, we buy things, we sell things, and finance sees the numbers. Nobody has to do stuff for finance. They're just a receiver of everything. But when we come to testing and finance says, well, I want to test this specific report or I want to see this specific data, I need to work with the teams that would generate that in the real world to get them to make it specifically for finance. So there's a lot more coordination, guidance, and support I found when this happens, because these people are used to just doing their day-to-day job and they don't think outside their department necessarily. And that's where a lot of the challenges I've seen come in, and where a lot of the guidance has been, is just pulling the various groups together to get those day-to-day end-to-end flows to happen. Some of the considerations around guidance and support is that you get great opportunity to see how your company as a whole uses the software, especially on large scale project implementations. And you'll also gain unique insights into the expectations for your software. So when we're caught up in our IT and delivery team, we often have expectations based on how we know it's been designed, sitting through all the requirement sessions, reading all the literature that comes out of the design phase, where our expectations aren't necessarily the same as what our business may have. And as they're testing, you're going to hear them say things like, well, this is dumb. It doesn't make any sense. Why would it do that? And those are probably things that as a tester, we just know that's the way it works. But when we hear those things come from our business testers, it starts to show us that, hey, they have different expectations of the software. There's different ways they want it to work than what we would have expected. And sometimes those things end up as bugs. Sometimes they end up as enhancements for a later day. Sometimes it's closed as works as designed, even though the business doesn't like it. But it gives you really great insights into knowing what they expect it to work. And it can even make changes into future releases, depending on what's found. The fourth one, and this is a big one, this one kind of will either clear the path for you or make it more difficult, depending how good you are at managing expectations. Oftentimes, especially if you're bringing your business in early, or if they're used to just being in the UAT phase and now they're going to be in the full phase of testing from the first development deploy all the way to release, as testers, we know to expect quality and stability problems and to see issues. We also typically know what areas of the system haven't been written yet or have been written but are really, really problemsome. And it's up to you as the lead to manage expectations of your business testers. If they come into the room expecting to test something and you know that it hasn't been completely built, or you've heard there's lots of problems in it, and you don't manage that expectation, your business testers can get really upset fairly quickly. So what I would typically do before each session of testing that we would have is I would understand what did we have planned to cover that day? How is it looking overall from a quality, stability, and basic issues in the product of that area, and give them some context before we start. So I tell them things like, okay, we're going to be testing reports today. Only 3 of the 20 reports you guys wanted are done right now. There's 2 that they've started on, but you're going to notice a lot of missing data with them. And the other 15 are not ready at all. They're not even going to show up in the list. If they do, you probably click the link and nothing's going to happen. That way I didn't have people complaining going, well, I tried to test reports. There were 10 of them there. Only 1 did something. I don't know what this team is doing. I found when I didn't do that, I would get a lot of people upset, a lot of people frustrated, and even have people escalating to their managers saying, this project's going really badly, so much doesn't work, because we've asked them to focus on what doesn't work. I didn't tell them what didn't work, so of course they're going to find everything that doesn't work. So I found by telling them, here's what you're going to find doesn't work. Here's where I want you to focus, because we're feeling pretty good that we've got it looking pretty stable and looking pretty good. I would get a lot better results. I would get testing done in the areas that needed to be done because they'd ignore the stuff I told them not to worry about because it wasn't ready. And the issues would be actual issues. And I had far fewer escalations because they knew that wouldn't work. And we have to keep doing this. Remind them that they're there to find problems. They're there to communicate those problems to me and the rest of the team, but to continue to set and manage the expectations around here's how it's going to look and what's going to be happening. I also watch very closely to see if my business testers are getting overwhelmed. I found that when I talked about that spectrum earlier of where they think testing's really easy or they get overwhelmed by the complexity, once we start testing, a lot of those people that thought it was easier slip into feeling really overwhelmed fairly quickly. Once they start to see how many scenarios we have to cover, how many different ways we're going to look at the system, how much time we really have left, they can start to feel like they don't have enough time. They may also be still doing their full-time job to some degree, and they may just feel like there's too much. So this is where I need to work closely with their managers and leaderships to either free up more of my testers' time, extend deadlines if that's possible, or even look for more people. Is there someone else from the business that we could pull just even for a little while that really knows the system well, because I won't have time to train them, that can offer some help here to get the amount of testing we have to do done and get the team feel better about the complexity that they're seeing. So it's constant expectation management of my test team, but also the managers and the leadership on the business side, as well as my IT project as well. The other thing is that the testers that you have may still have a full-time job. Even if they've been dedicated 100%, it's typically not really 100%. Depending on their role in the company, they may have emails that they have to answer. They may be providing support to their team back at the office that they came from. They may actually have other work that they may be committed to. So this is something that you're going to have to balance as well, especially when you're in those intense testing phases of time where you need them to be hands on the system all day long. They can't be running out to check emails. They can't be being pulled for a couple hours just for a quick meeting. And it can be a challenge because oftentimes these people don't report to you or even the project manager on your project. And it's likely their manager back in their full-time job that's pulling them. So it's a tough game to play with. How do I get these people more dedicated? I can't demand that they stay because I'm not their manager, and it's actually their manager pulling them away. So here's where you have to really learn to influence people rather than manage them. Be realistic about the commitments and really work with your project manager and team to say, here's how testing is being impacted when my testers are still being pulled away. I found projects where this hasn't been a problem at all. It's been known that, no, this person needs the test. They're completely unavailable. Nobody's going to bother them. But I've had other projects, typically where they don't value testing, where I've had to, again, sell, here's why testing is important. Here's what this is going to mean for our project. Here's where it introduces risk as far as we're not going to have as much coverage as we wanted to testing. These are the areas we're not going to test because my testers keep getting pulled away. Here's how it's impacting me and how it'll impact your project. If you can speak in language like that, I find it helps to influence them better because you're not just saying, I need more people because we can't test. You're really quantifying it to say, we haven't been able to test reporting at all because you keep pulling my reporting people. We're likely to go live with these reports without them being tested at all. They may or may not work because no one's looked at them. Is that a risk the business wants to take? When I put it in that language, I get a lot more attention than when I say, well, I just can't get testing done. It becomes more of a powerful statement. So if you find your testers are being pulled away, try to quantify that in a way that'll get people to sit up and go, oh no, that's really bad. We can't have that happen. So the big part of our job as the leaders is, again, remember they're not testers, but set the team up for success. And we're going to look at the next few slides on how to do that. I found that when I was leading business testers, it reminded me of my son playing soccer. And this is actually a picture. He's the boy on the left of the screen holding the red and white soccer ball. When we gave the kids all balls and told them, go play soccer, even though we'd sit them down, we'd tell them the rules and we'd explain, here's how soccer works, they would go out there and they would run around and they would kick balls, and one would get distracted because a kitty came out on the field. So one would go chase the kitty and 3 or 4 more would chase after the cat. And it was really hard to keep them all focused. And when I first started leading business testers, I would come up with the vision and the plan. I'd have one meeting where I'd bring them all in the room and I'd tell them all, and then I'd send them off and have them test. They'd start out okay, just like my son's soccer team, but then there'd be distractions. There'd be meetings that come up, emails that happen, other things that would happen, and they'd end up like the soccer team where they were all off scattered doing their own thing. Some were still testing, but others were really distracted. So we really need, as the lead, to set the direction, build and communicate the plan, constant guiding and support, and coach to success. Which is what I realized when I was watching the kids play soccer. If the coach was on the field, reminding them what they were supposed to do, reminding them what the goal was, you got to get the ball in the net. No, you guys need to come over here. You pass the ball to that guy because it's his turn. You pass it to that guy. It made it go a lot smoother and they could actually play the game. And when I saw it in that light, it was like, yeah, I need to keep setting the direction, communicating the plan, guidance and support, coaching to success, and then repeat. Remind them of the direction, continue to communicate and change the plan if needed, give them support, coach them to success, on and on and on. And that's how we really set them up. So how do we do each of those 4 points? I work in a lot of mind maps, and so this is a leading business tester's mind map, one arm of it on this slide. And I typically will use lightweight documentation like this when I'm working with my business teams. I don't have any examples of documentation, but I put it in this format because it's really easy to talk about this way. So I start out with, I do a lot of presentations when I'm leading business testers. I don't write large test strategies in Word and get everyone to read it and sign off on it. I found, especially if people aren't full-time testing and they still have their job, no one would read it. So I'll do typically a number of presentations, sometimes with one large team. Sometimes I'll do the same presentation over and over again just to accommodate people's schedules. I may have a couple departments come to one and a couple other departments come to another one. Keep it small so people can ask questions, and then give people multiple times to attend in case their days are busy. So within the presentations I'll do that first overall vision and plan. We'll talk about our test process, our schedule, set expectations again around what I'm going to need from them, when I'm going to need it, all of that so they know. And then each cycle of testing, whatever those may be broken out into, I do a kickoff again. I remind them of the vision and plan, the process we're going to take, the schedule, the overall schedule, and then more of a breakdown for that specific cycle. And then the expectations again of the overall test effort as well as the test effort for that cycle. It's a constant reminder for them. It's in a presentation format. It gives people verbal and a visual. It's interactive. I'm typically fun as a speaker in front of the room. So people usually have a good time, and I found the information sticks a lot better than if I just give them a document. I also, at the end of the meeting, email out to everyone that came copies of the presentation so they have that reference material to refer to, a link to where they can find it online as well, just so that I overwhelm them with information so that some of it sticks and I've got them in the right headspace and with the right expectations so that I can start out successfully on the right foot. The next one we move into is workshops. And here's where I get really into the test execution part of things. So we do workshops for all sorts of things. Instead of giving them a template, which how I started was I made a nice simple template. I gave it all to them in an email and said, put your business scenarios in. And of course they were busy. They didn't understand the test language, even though I trained them to be testers. I found they really struggled. So I had to really step up again with the hand-holding. And I thought back to it again, like my 5-year-old son playing soccer. If I gave him a sheet of rules and handed him a ball and said, go play soccer, he wouldn't be successful because it's not his background. If I took him out on the field and myself, showed him how to kick the ball, did some fun things with it, we did it together, he learned a lot more. And that's the approach I take with my business is we're going to do workshops and we're going to do this together. So a few of the workshops that we do are the business scenario definition workshops, where we flush out what are all the business scenarios for this business group. So I might start with the HR department. How do we hire people? How do we give them benefits? How do we pay them? How do we terminate them? Either voluntarily or involuntarily. What happens when someone retires? What happens when an employee dies? These are all what HR deals with. So that's where we talk and we say, okay, well, how do we hire someone? And I capture all of those details. We break down the application to say, okay, well, there's hiring, there's firing, there's employee deaths, there's all those different categories I talked about, and we start to develop scenarios out of that. We look at the application breakdown. We may look at the different screens of the application. We may look at day in the life scenarios where, okay, well, if we decide to hire somebody, what does that look like? If we promote somebody, what does that look like? We look at the system integrations. Well, when we do payroll, where do we send the pay information? How do I get money in my bank account at the end of the day? There's clearly something that tells the payroll company to send my bank money. How does that all work? And then what are the business process integrations? So if you pay an employee, how does that appear in finance? Because at the end of the day, finance is responsible for all the money we bring into a company and all the money we spend. So paying up an employee for the work they've done is a spend. How do we get that? And what are all the processes that hang together? So when I pay somebody, it's not just the HR group that deals with that. There's tax implications, there's financial implications. What does that look like? And that's what we do in these workshops, is to flush out all those scenarios. Again, I'm not writing typical test cases. Usually I'm capturing this all in Excel, and it is just like the breakdown that I mentioned there. We can hire somebody, we can fire somebody, or we can terminate somebody, whether it's voluntarily or involuntary. We can promote someone, we can demote someone. I haven't captured that in step 1, type in the employee's name. Step 2, assign them an employee number. We don't document it that way. We say hire a person, fire a person, somebody quits. That's how we capture the scenarios, because my business people know when they read hire somebody, they know what to do when they sit in front of the computer and do that action. I don't need step-by-step breakdowns. So it's very high level scenarios, but it's in language my business can understand and take away and run with. We also workshop our test scope, what we're gonna include, what we're not gonna include, how we're gonna document things. If we do need more traditional test scripts, which I've seen, especially in the electrical and engineering industry, where there were formulas that needed to be checked. So we had written more test script type documents because it had in there what formulas should be run on the data and what the outcome should be. And the testers needed that. But we weren't writing test scripts just so that somebody who didn't know the system could pick it up and run it. A lot of the time we would use checklists or matrices that would show, if you're a manager, you have this control. If you're an employee, you have other control. And it was just a matrix that would say, okay, as a manager, can I do approvals? Can I disapprove? Can I enter a new requisition? And as a manager, we'd say, yes, you can do all 3. As an employee, you can only enter in a new requisition. You can't approve or disapprove someone else's. So we'd make checklists to show matrices of things like that, because it was quick and easy for people to look at, and my business testers knew what it meant. We also workshop the testing process. How are we going to manage our test cases or our scenarios? And oftentimes it's always been in Excel. I found that the tools such as Quality Center and the heavier weight test case management tools were overkill for what I needed. I do most of the time use defect management tools. They're fairly quick and easy for my business testers to learn. I usually just give them a quick hour session on how to work it. I have taken more complex systems and really dumbed them down so they were quite simple, so people could use them without having to have a lot of defect management tool training. In some organizations, we've even used Excel and just put a lot of formulas in behind because we didn't have access to that. So these are some of the processes I might bring people up to speed on, but again, it's only because I need to capture this data, not because I want to make them into testers. So it's very lightweight, a lot of business language, and fairly easy for them to work with. We also do workshops on test execution. Rather than sending people away to their desks and have them run tests, we would schedule time frame to say, okay, the HR department's going to come in. We want to get these tests covered today. Then we're going to follow that with management team coming in and being able to do their performance reviews. And then we're going to have finance come in and make sure that they can do payroll. So we'd have all of these days and plans scheduled, bring everybody into a war room so we can all talk. I may bring in support just so that there's not just me in the room. I have other people that have test background that can help with logging defects, help with keeping people on track. And also when we would do defect retesting, we tend to have everyone in the room. And then we did a lot of retrospectives just to check in with people, see how they were doing, make sure everything was going smoothly, gather feedback from them on what maybe didn't work and what they'd like to see changed, really keep them feeling like they were engaged in helping me drive this process. It wasn't just me standing at the front of the room saying, everyone shall do it this way. It was more a collaborative effort where they got to feel like they were part of the team, because they were. If they weren't there, I'd have been in big trouble trying to test this all by myself. So I really appreciated their opinion and tried to get that out of them. So we also would do a lot of one-on-one sessions. So whether this was just with me and one tester or me with a small group of testers, so in the bigger sessions, we would do the scenario definition, the test scope, and the execution. But sometimes for more complex areas, we had to do the one-on-one sessions. So like that session where I had the maps of Alberta with the electrical lines drawn on them. Those were me and 4 or 5 engineers and the designer of the schematics that sat together, and we whipped through that pretty quickly. We didn't even actually do business scenario definition or write out test scopes. We basically did test execution, and then we didn't even log defects at the time because the girl that wrote the diagrams was sitting right there and she would just mark them up. She went away and changed them. And then we came back once she had them done and went through that session again to refine anything that was missed. So we didn't need to do all of this just to do it. We knew what we wanted to cover. It was basically a point in one of my slides and we just went ahead and did it. So again, with business testing, as testers, we make a lot of documentation because our company requires it, but I found that I could get really lightweight with my documentation in certain instances when it was just my business testing team, because we could do things a lot quicker and didn't need the documentation to support it. Finally, the point around managing expectations. So the follow-up and the communication piece. You want to really have people understand what they can expect from you and what you're expecting from them. It helps strengthen your relationship. A lot of that is done face-to-face through frequent touch points. And again, really try to use the business speak, not your tester speak. You seem to get into the better, stronger relationship when you can speak the same language as them. And it can be hard. I know when I did the electrical engineering, I kept calling things the wrong thing. But because I was trying and I wasn't forcing them to talk in ways I understood, I was coming to the table saying, hey guys, I'm interested to learn your area. I want to know more about what you do. They seemed to really embrace me and make me feel part of the team and would point out when I maybe had something wrong. And we kept it fairly lighthearted, and they would often tease me about when I got something wrong. But it really made for a good relationship. They felt that I had their back. I would advocate for them. I understood what they were doing. And it really made my testing go a lot smoother. And also keeping documentation lightweight, which you touched on in the other point as well. When you can, if you have opportunities to do that because of the people in the room, absolutely take that opportunity. So what are some of the benefits to you as the leader of this? Well, you're going to gain new insights into the business and the applications. You make a lot of new friends. Through the projects that I've had, I've made friends in all sorts of different areas of the industry that I wouldn't have gotten exposed to before. I had, with the electrical project, the opportunity to go to the control room and see them actually controlling all the power for our province, which was fascinating. I learned that, in that project, I learned that wind power isn't as great as everyone thinks it is, because it's hard to predict when we're going to have wind. If we have too much wind, we can't use wind power. We can't store wind power. So we can't always be reliant on it as much as we want. And these were things I never would have learned just being the tester. So it was neat to see aspects of the business through the relationships that I built by going into where these people work day to day and seeing what it is that they would do. And I really found it more surprising and rewarding than I imagined. I saw a different side of how we develop software for people and what they really think of when we develop it. And I saw the opportunity to make the experience of the IT group giving you more software or giving you new software be more positive to our end users. I know as testers, we try to think like them and get in their heads and really understand what they need. But I've heard so many times end users say, well, they gave me this new software and I hate it and it doesn't work like the last stuff and I really am not happy. I don't know what those IT people are thinking. And it breaks my heart because I know how hard I work and people on my IT team work. So when I got to bring the business testers in and give them a bit of my world as far as how tough it can be to make software and how we really do try to have your best interests at heart and get them part of that process, they really seem to change their opinion of what we do too. So it was a good win for both of us, and it was actually a lot of fun. So I'm looking forward to the next assignment I have where I'm going to be leading a bunch of people again through business testing, because it's often a lot of fun. As many times as you want to pull your hair out, it can be a lot of fun as well. So in summary, remember the 5 facts that we covered around them not being testers, around not training them, managing expectations. Continue to provide that guidance and support. Use the lightweight documentation and in-person communication whenever you can. The more that you can have one-on-one with people as opposed to just firing off emails will make everything go so much more smoothly. And it does take a bit of an extroverted personality to put yourself out there, meet people that you don't know, communicate with them in a language that you don't necessarily understand. Like when I'm talking HR process and finance process, I feel really uncomfortable because it's not an area that I'm an expert by any means in. I barely know it. And I'm used to being in software testing, really knowing my stuff and really feeling confident when I talk about testing. So it's uncomfortable for me to then go to a finance team and try to understand their world. And so it can be tough, but I force myself, keep doing the in-person communication because it's so valuable for them to put a face to the name, to put a personality, to know that you're working hard for them, to know that you want to see the product be in good shape at the end of the day as well. Also, remember the reason your organization is using business testers, because when you get frustrated, it'll be important to bring back, okay, we're doing this because it's going to make the project faster, or we're doing this because we just don't have the budget to hire people. Because then you'll realize, as frustrated as you get, where, well, it's just be easier with professional testers, there's that reason that we can't do it for this time. And really look to the benefits that is going to grow your leadership abilities and grow your relationship with the business, especially if this is a company that you're an employee of. You're going to start to meet a lot of different people from around the company. And it's interesting when we have a career in one place where people, person in finance that you was once the tester for your project ends up being the CFO of the company. And that can open up opportunities for you to move around the company as well. Maybe not in a finance role, but some other way in the company. And I've seen that happen for people as well, where they've made relationships across more than just IT, and how it's really benefited them to be able to try something different in their organization. So that was all I had today. I'd like to open it up if there's any questions that anyone has, and turn it back over to Rick.
Yeah, well, that was great, Nancy. Yeah, one of my favorite parts of it was the analogy of the soccer analogy. My sons played t-ball, and it was very similar.
Yeah, and people say, well, isn't that mean comparing professionals to children? But I'm not saying that they're immature. It's more they don't have that experience, just like our kids don't. They don't have experience of playing soccer or t-ball, right? And so how do we give them that, right? And if you think of them having that childlike innocence and newness to what they're experiencing, it tends to bring me, at least, into a better headspace to be able to know how to guide them through that.
Right. You know, and my former career, I was in retail management, and it was always, you know, one of my bosses, one of the first lessons I ever learned when I was trying to train people was that he told me, is like, look, you got to tell them, you have to remind them of what you've told them, and then you have to tell them again. And so it sounded very similar to dealing with business testers there. So we do have a couple of questions. So Belinda asks, how do you handle business testers that have been assigned as testers against their wishes?
So I'd really try to understand how they feel about that to begin with. I'm assuming from the question that they're not happy about it. So I'd like to know why. I know some people think that it's a demotion. I've been taken out of my business and now I have to do testing, and well, anybody could do testing. Why did I get picked? So I'd really want to work with those people to show them what value they bring to the team, how their experience and their expertise in the area, and really play up that, you know, you are the expert from this area of the business. I don't know what you know, and I need to get that information out of you because you're the person that knows it. I really make them feel like the project is in jeopardy if we don't have your help on this. I can't do it myself, and really start to show them how testing isn't just a rote exercise where you're going to read something and click on a bunch of buttons and write down whether or not it did what it said it should do. I want you to get in there and explore. You're going to have the first opportunity to see this new system. You're going to be the person that goes back to your department and really can show other people how the system works. Really try to play on that aspect of it to get them excited about being given this assignment that they may not really be too happy about.
Yeah, I bet that's difficult.
It can be.
So the next question we have from Mohan is, what test case management tools and defect management tools do you use?
So again, I try to keep it really lightweight. For test case management tools, it's typically been either mind maps, where we put all the scenarios in a mind map. So similar to how I had it broken down and what I do in a workshop and the various aspects on that one slide, I would do things in mind maps or in Excel, and just make an Excel workbook where if we're working with HR, we're going to hire an employee, we're going to hire a contractor, we're going to terminate an employee, we're going to have an employee quit, and that would be my scenarios. I'm not looking for a tool that I can go step by step and document that, because the person running the test is in HR. They hire and fire people every day, so they know how to do it. I don't need to write it out step by step. So using Quality Center or a bigger tool like that is overkill. So for that, I use Excel. For defect tracking, I've used Bugzilla in the past, or some more web-based defect tracking tools. Again, it's really simple. It's basically a title, what the defect is, the steps to reproduce, who logged it, and then sometimes I let the testers pick the priority based on what they feel. But again, it's very simple. They could add an attachment of a screenshot if they desire. Sometimes we've even just captured it in Excel, and I've had a tester log the defects in the defect management tool if I found it too complicated to train the business on it. I want them testing. I want them doing their job in front of the computer. Again, they're not testers. They don't need to know how to work with Quality Center. They don't need to know how to log defects when they go back to their real life job. So I don't need to train them up in all that. So I keep it lightweight for my tracking and recording for me to be able to report on, but that's about it.
Okay. Got a couple more questions, and I do have a few more after that, but we're kind of running short on time. But these two questions were particularly good. Jamieson asked, at what part of the typical development cycle do you start including the business testers?
So even on a project where I have professional testers, I include my business testers early. So if I was an agile project, let's say, we have our sprint 0 where we're basically doing the legwork in the design. But as soon as I've got some sort of product that I can show my testers is when I engage them. So if at a sprint 1, I've got one screen built, I'll bring business testers in, even on a traditional project, that early. And again, it can backfire on you. This is where setting expectations, really explaining what works, what doesn't, where we're seeing a lot of quality issues is important. But I want to get them involved as early as possible because there's a lot of kinks you may have to work out with leading business testers. Just getting them used to being in front of a system, having them, especially if it's a brand new system. If it's an upgrade to their existing system, it's easier. But if it looks totally different than what they're used to dealing with, there's going to be a big learning curve. Even though they're a subject matter expert in HR, they're not used to the same flow of, because this software is different as far as how it flows. The screens look different. The fields are different. It's laid out differently. So you're going to have a big learning curve to overcome. So I want to bring them in early so they can play around. There's no real pressure to get scenarios done. They can try the various aspects that we've got finished so far or that are in progress. They can give me feedback. Usually at this stage, I just take verbal feedback. I don't have them log bugs. If bugs fall out of that, I deal with them. So that I can get everybody comfortable with it. So on day 1 of the test cycle, I don't have a bunch of people showing up that I have to train on the system potentially, that are unfamiliar, that are nervous. It becomes comfortable for them because they've seen it a number of times before. They've worked with it in cases. So as early as what makes sense is when I try to bring them in.
Great. And we'll just do this one last question, and then
Okay.
I do have some other questions that I'll forward to you. And if you could answer those, we can put those on the blog when we post your webinar. And also, one kind of related to that, do you have this slide presentation on SlideShare, or can you provide a PDF for us? We have a lot of people.
Yeah, I can give you guys a PDF for sure.
Okay,
I don't have
great.
it anywhere, but
Okay.
I can do that for you.
Awesome. We'll get that up on the site as well. The last question is, what is a good way to articulate the need to management/leadership for knowledgeable business testers?
That's a good one.
I thought so.
I know, that's one that I have to think about.
Yeah, Amanda asked that question.
Thank you, Amanda. You're challenging me. I guess what I would really want to understand, I guess you got to come up with concrete examples. So if I got a bunch of co-op students across the board, I couldn't go back and say, well, I need people that know the system, because I'll just get back, well, they can learn it. They're co-op students. That's what they do. They're in education. They're smart. They can learn anything, which is absolutely true. So I'd want to pick my riskier or my more concerning area and really focus on that. So the project I'm on right now is an HR project. So if they didn't give me people that knew how to hire employees properly, I'd say, okay, well, the risk of giving me not knowledgeable people in this area is that we can probably do testing, we'll probably find bugs, but they won't be the real intense bugs that we're going to find. They'll be more surface bugs because the people won't have the expertise to really dig deep. The risk of that is that when we go live, we may not be able to hire people. So we may find bugs when we go live where integrations aren't working, we're not passing hiring information on to our downstream systems. We may be in a position where we can't hire anybody. Well, that should make people's heads pop up and go, well, if we can't hire people, we can't run the company. This is really bad. We hire 10, 20 or 30 people every day. We absolutely can't have that happen. So by showing them the fallout that could happen by not having the experienced people should get them to say, okay, well, we should get you somebody that has that experience so we can make sure that that doesn't happen and reduce our risk there. So I'm going to want to look at where I think my big risks are, find a way to articulate those to leadership in ways that they'll understand so that they can make a decision around, yeah, maybe we need to give Nancy some more experienced, knowledgeable people so we can mitigate these risks.
Excellent. Well, wow, Nancy, that was a really awesome webinar there. I was just chatting with my other coworkers about how awesome it would be to have it at STP Con.
Oh, well, we could do that, absolutely.
I thought it's very good. Speaking of that, and I wanted to thank you for your time today and your informative webinar. Look forward to seeing you in California in the nice, warm, non-snowy weather.
Exactly. I will not bring the snow with me.
that would throw California into a complete tailspin, I bet.
It would.
But yeah, no, we'll look forward to seeing you there in April. And thanks again. And for those of you that asked questions that we didn't get to, I will send those to Nancy. She can answer those, and we'll get those posted when I actually post the recording of this webinar. So basically, just look for an email from Software Test Pro about the webinar being posted. All right. Well, thanks again, Nancy. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All righty.
Have a great day.
Yeah, you too. And everybody, thank you for joining us. And remember, our next webinar that's coming up is on February 28th. It's with Michael Hackett from Logigear. Today's regression automation challenges for continuous delivery. So you can go on to softwaretestpro.com/training, and you can find that webinar and sign up for it. I want to thank everybody else for joining us today, and I hope that you guys have a great Valentine's Day. I forgot to say Happy Valentine's Day to Nancy, but everybody enjoy your day, and we will see you on the next STP webinar. Thank you very much.